Wedding rear.
Numbing hand.
Wedding rear.
Essence of slug. Numbing hand.
Wedding rear.
Essence of slug. Numbing hand.
Wedding rear.
Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of It's Time to Rewind, a podcast trapped in its own time loop right along with the movies we discuss. This season is the serial bomb, yo! And we're looking at Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel, starting off with Buffy Season 6, Episode 5, Life Serial. Today we're discussing the fifth loop, starting at 25 minutes and 46 seconds with Buffy walking up to the door, and ends at 25 minutes and 51 seconds with Buffy tearing the bell off the door. Joining me for the third and final time is my guest, Declan Craggs. How are you doing today?
I'm fantastic, thank you.
Yeah, so this is your shortest loop of this montage so far, coming in at it's just 5 seconds. And again, I love breaking these time loops down and these montages at this micro level. And this one is really the most straightforward. And I do have to say that it reminds me very much of the montage in Groundhog Day, where Phil starts trying to break the alarm clock.
Yeah, I think, those like in Groundhog Day, that's the I just had enough moment for the character.
Yeah, and in the same way, like in Groundhog Day, the alarm clock is basically like the signifier. It's the thing that seems to initiate each iteration of the time loop, in the same way that this doorbell is the sound that she hears every time she knows that the time loop has been reset. And so this is her attacking that auditory signal that happens every time, and she just rips it off the wall, even though, we'll find out in just, 5 seconds later that, or I guess in the next second, that it doesn't actually accomplish anything, and she is still stuck in the time loop, and the bell is restored just right afterwards.
I think when you have these sort of these, like you said, those auditory signifiers like the doorbell, like the alarm clock in Groundhog Day, I think that helps the viewers feel the frustration with the characters.
Mm-hmm.
Every time you hear it and you're like, oh no, they're not out of it yet, and you're sort of you're rooting for them to get to that next stage, to get out of that time loop. And so every time you hear that doorbell, you feel that frustration with the character.
Yeah, and I do want to take just a quick moment, since this one, since this is so short, to talk about bells in general. And this bell, it is like the classic antique shopkeeper's bell. This isn't like the modern door chime that a lot of time stores have, where you just have like the magnetic switch attached to the door, and then whenever the alarm system detects that the door is open, it'll have like the electronic beep or the electronic chime. But this one is an actual physical bell attached to a metal arm that the door physically hits to ring, and I do love that classic feel of this physical ringing bell. It really gives this. It really adds to the feeling of the magic box as a physical store, and as like a place to buy real magic.
Yeah, I agree. I think like you said, it makes it feel like a real shop, and it makes it feel like like when you go into an old bookstore or an old antique store, something of that nature. You imagine that they would have that sort of bell, and the magic box is that same sort of feeling that you get.
Mm-hmm. And I did look up, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but I did look at the history of bells. I couldn't find a whole lot on the history of like this type of like a shopkeeper bell, as it's called. But the earliest bells were found in China from around 3000 BC, and those were typically made out of pottery. And about 1,000 years later, they start being made from metal. And then, a few thousand years later, around 1000 AD, iron starts becoming the most common metal to use to make bells. And then these days, like modern bells are typically made from what's called bell metal, which is about 80% copper and 20% tin. Though smaller bells like this is typically made from brass or bronze. So there's your brief history lesson on the bell. That's really all I have for this loop, and unless you have any other, I do love Buffy's smug look at the end, where she tears the bell off, and then she has this, this nice little smirk where she's like, "Yes, job well done."
Yeah, you almost wonder, does she think that she solved the problem by doing that? Finally, the problem is solved.
Yeah, I don't think that she solved the problem, but she just got, a brief moment of satisfaction. Like, yes, that's, I got that out of my system. I'm glad that I did that. It made me happy for a moment, even though I know that I'm going to hear that bell again in just a few moments.
Yeah, no. As time loops go, I don't think you could get much shorter than this.
Yeah, we do have a couple shorter ones, coming up. But yeah, this one is one of the shorter ones. But I haven't actually talked to you yet about your history with Buffy as a whole, with the show, and also with season 6. So where did you first come across Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
I must have been around, I reckon, 9-10 years old. Because I never saw Buffy the Vampire Slayer when it first came out. So I wasn't following it episode by episode. But I remember seeing reruns on the TV when I was younger. And when you're 9-10 years old, it's just a cool program about someone fighting vampires. Mm-hmm. And that was sort of how it was left for a little while. And I never watched it in order. I just watched these reruns. And then as I got a bit older, probably around 18, I thought, I remember that show Buffy. So I rewatched them all from the beginning, including Angel, which I didn't even know existed when I was younger. And I rewatched them all when I was about 18. And then since then, that was about 13 years ago. Since then, I've probably watched them all through about 3-4 times.
Nice. So, what would you say is your, do you have a favorite season? Whenever you do the rewatch, do you always start at season 1 and make it all the way through season 7?
I think on one of the occasions I started at season 4, because that's, for me, when I feel it gets good. I really like Spike as a character. It's season 4 when his character really starts to develop.
Oh, that's interesting. I think most people think that, I believe, season 2 and 3 are the high points, and then it kind of goes down around season 4 with college. I believe that's the college years with Riley.
Yeah, I mean, there are parts about season 4. I like the whole initiative parts of season 4. Season 2, the Angel storyline is very good. I love the Mayor storyline in season 3. But I think in terms of character, in terms of a lot of character development, I got a lot out of things from season 4, especially from, as I said, Spike was one of my favourite characters, especially when I was a bit younger. So I think that you get a lot more Spike from season 4.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, he
probably-
really becomes a different character starting. Like as soon as he gets the chip in his head, he really starts to become a different character, and then he it was a bit of a not shock because I kind of knew what I was going into, but whenever I didn't do a full Buffy rewatch, I just did a season 6 rewatch for this season. And jumping at the beginning of season 6, I almost forgot how different of a character Spike seemed to be at this point in time, where he was neutered, but he was because he had the chip in his head and he can't attack humans, and he also has this love/obsession with Buffy. And because of that, he also has this protective instinct towards Dawn. And
yeah,
I think that especially, I had kind of forgotten about that part of his character. And so jumping in at the beginning of season 6 with this with Spike being very protective towards Dawn, where he's literally like her babysitter, that was an odd jumping on point for me. And I know we talked about the trio, but what's your feelings overall about season 6 compared to the rest of the show?
yeah, I think it's up there. I mean, I think season 6 is really, I think it's quite good, and you've got some really good episodes in there. You know, I like how Buffy, you see a really different side to Buffy. You see, you know, Buffy at probably her lowest because they bring her back from the dead, and you see her go through quite a lot. And you see that her development with Spike, her withdrawing from her friends who were very much at the centre in earlier seasons, but she pushes them away and, you know, puts people like Spike in the centre of her sort of, you know, her network as her sort of escape from real life.
Yeah, I think, you know, I just finished season 6 a few days ago, and I was really surprised with how much I liked the majority of this season. I know overall it is like one of the darker seasons because it has like a major character death in it who does not come back, unlike Angel back in, you know, season 2 whenever she killed Angel, and season 3 with you know, Faith killing someone else, a human. And, you know, this has a lot of dark moments, and a lot of the characters really struggle the most, because like all the characters really have their own struggles with adulthood. You know, we have Xander's fear of commitment, and, you know, the mistakes that he makes with his relationship with Anya. We have Buffy kind of struggling with young adulthood as someone who is thrown into this situation where she has to be a mother to her younger sister, and she's only, you know, 20 to 21 in this season, and everything that entails. And I feel like the season as a whole was almost a little bit ahead of its time, because I feel like this should resonate more with like millennials who are in adulthood now, and they're in this like extended struggle with, you know, they've either finished or dropped out of college, and then they're in this like limbo to where they don't know what they're able to do with their life, and they're in this bad economy and they can't necessarily find as good a job as they'd hoped, and even if it might not be like Double Meat Palace, but you know, there is all that. And from my point of view, there were only 2 episodes that I did not like on a rewatch, and one was basically the Willow magic drug binge episode, because I liked how it was set up, because it kind of had the slow build up showing her struggles with being addicted to magic, but then she goes from having this addiction to basically going on a heroin binge.
I think it's quite a jerk, isn't it?
Yeah.
In her character, it's very jerking in sort of the character as Willow. It very quickly changes.
Mm-hmm.
I think as an audience, you're like, oh, what happened there?
Yeah, I think it was especially because it had this kind of slower build up, but then it like really spiked, and then she went from someone who's struggling with a magic addiction to one who is full on basically addicted to hard drugs, to where she's lying to her friends and doing all this stuff in order to get her next fix. And that just felt like that spiked too quickly. And then it was also resolved within the same episode, where that's whenever she decided to quit and go cold turkey. And for the most part, she had some struggles, but she was mostly successful up until Tara dies.
Yeah.
Which that also doesn't really feel accurate to real life.
No, you sort of feel that her sort of, because of like you said, her addiction should have been a slow, because these things, I think in real life addictions, they don't just peak suddenly, or very rarely. There's it builds up and it plateaus for a while, and then there's a slow come down, for people if they move away from addiction. Whereas to get to that point and get out of it in one episode, like you said, is not necessarily how addiction works for most people.
Yeah, I think if they would have basically extended the events of that episode across 4 or 5 episodes, where there was this, because I could understand having a ramp up, especially after Tara leaves her, but I still think that it should have taken a couple episodes for her to get to the level where she is basically drunk driving and has the accidents. If that had happened 3 episodes later, rather than in that same episode, it would have worked better for that metaphor. And then the other episode that I really struggled with was the wedding episode. That felt, again, it was this, they had hints of Xander not being ready for marriage, but then to have this fake vision of his future where he is suddenly this New Jersey stereotype, almost like a Guido character that felt so completely out of character for anything that we've seen Xander being at this point. And yet that scares him enough to just run away for a couple episodes. They knew they wanted them to break up, but they didn't know how to do it properly. Because I do like how everything resolves after the breakup, but I just didn't like how Xander acted for that wedding episode.
I feel like with the Willow episode that we've just spoke about in this one with Xander, it feels like they've had maybe a couple of plot points they needed to get across, but to get out of the way to move on to the next, so we can move on to the next things, because both those episodes you could have got across potentially the same point, over more episodes, or in a different way that was more in keeping with the characters that we know.
Right. Did you have any other, episodes that in season 6 that were high points for you? I know there's Once More with Feeling, which I think is almost everybody's one of everybody's favorites, and that is one that I'm going to be covering as a bonus episode.
Yeah, so obviously I won't talk about it too much because it's something you're going to discuss soon, and I look forward to definitely hearing that episode. But yeah, obviously Once More with Feeling was something that was just great. I mean, I would struggle to find someone that that likes Buffy that doesn't like that episode. I like the ending. I like the final 3 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
They sort of, I really like, well, I say like, the way they had Warren coming in, and obviously with Tara's death, I think that felt very different to anything we've seen, because it's, he had a gun, he's a human with a gun that's killed somebody, that's the main character, and that hasn't really happened, without them coming back to life again.
Yeah, it really brought, I agree that, like, that moment and that whole concept just really brought this different energy. It's like, Buffy knows how to deal with demons and the supernatural and magic, but a gun is just completely different. And not only a gun, but a gun being wielded by a human, someone that, she's not supposed to kill. Humans are subject to human laws, where she is basically, they don't really put it in these terms, but she's basically like a magic cop that deals out magic justice for killing demons that fall out of line. And I think this, I don't remember for sure, but I think it's also interesting that this season does bring in a lot more, not necessarily good demons, but at least a lot more like neutral demons, like demons that are allowed to exist within the human realm without the Slayer needing to kill them, because they're not actively killing humans themselves. They're still evil, but they're a more neutral evil.
And that's quite nice to see in Buffy, because, in contrast with Angel, the Angel series, you see that a lot. That's, almost the premise of the show.
Mm-hmm.
You see a lot of neutral or good demons, but you haven't seen that as much in Buffy up until season 6. So that sort of brings that universe together a little bit.
Mm-hmm. And especially with the introduction of Clem, which we'll talk about, who was introduced in this episode, who is one of those small side characters that I just absolutely love.
Yeah, no, he is great.
Well, that's really all I have. So is anything else that you can think of that you want to talk about this episode or about Buffy in general?
No, not really. I mean, it's great to talk about. It's great to have somewhere that I can, or people can talk about Buffy, because it's such a great show with so many different interesting things that, you can talk about and sort of touch upon. And this is, this is a great episode, and the time loop sequence in this is, it really sort of adds to the episode. But yeah, no, that's all I've got.
All right. Well, thanks again so much for joining me for these 3 episodes. I look forward to see what you end up, bringing to the podcasting community in the future. And, I look forward to that. And hopefully our listeners will keep an eye out for that for any of your future projects. But as always, I am Bubbawheat, and you can find me at flightstightsandmovienights.com. You can find me on Twitter, where I'm at Bubbawheat. You can find this show, It's Time to Rewind, on Anchor.fm, as well as anywhere else that you listen to podcasts. We also have a Facebook group, It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group, where you can join and discuss episodes as they come out, as well as have any sort of discussions about time loop movies, TV shows, novels, comic books. Anything there is welcome. I'd also like to thank Epic Film Trailers UK for the use of their music for the opening and closing. And until next time, grrr!
Arg.
Word Maria.
Numbing hand.
Word Maria.
Essence of slug. A mummy hand.
Word new, yeah?
Essence of slug. A mummy hand.
Word new, yeah?